Hello and welcome to day 79 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlin Nyback. We're here discussing black issues in America, uh, finding out how black Americans live, breathe, and move in the aftermath, we'll say, of slavery. And you say, well, that's hundreds of years ago, and there's emancipation, there's civil rights, social integration, and all these things. There should be no issue with black folks in America. Black folks should be moving freely about in America. Well, we are not as a group. Too few of us are um, resting in the lap of American luxury, the American dream, and that has a lot of factors. And I'll start with one factor is black folks themselves. Um, Collectively, there are some issues with us as a group. Accountability, you know, it's one thing that we are uh, overrepresented in the penal system and drug addictions and alcoholisms and things like that. Yet they are sometimes traps that we willingly fall into. So we got to own a part of that responsibility. Now, but I will say overwhelmingly, um, white society, power, privilege, entitlement, expectation of favor among whites is a large factor, and that's some of the things we talk about here. So two ideas are emerging from this project. Um, this first idea has two parts. First part is that black mind from slavery, the conditioning still prevailing? Does it still have hold and have sway over black folks? Is denial of that a major factor in our social illness, so to speak? You know, you talk to the junkie, alcoholic, and if they are in denial, it's that much harder for them to treat that condition. you know, um, if I've got a major head wound that has gotten into my brain, well, I'm not necessarily going to feel it. I'm going to need the community to communicate and help patch that up. But I'm going to have trouble believing that until certain proofs are displayed, or maybe if I'm recognizing my behavior. But because it's a brain injury, I'm not going to necessarily know the particulars of my difficulty. The second part is, does the white mind of privilege, expectation of favor, get passed on from generation to generation, or are they just living, that, I mean, and I have my ideas, but I would say just this entitlement, this authority with which they move about the earth gives me some clues as to the answer to that question. And then the second vein that's coming out is black folks having the proper financial education. We are just at the mercy of financial institutions and powers in this country. And until we wake up and begin checking each other's financial literacy, doing proper things with our money and such, of understanding Federal Reserves and interest rates and stuff, more than just if the Federal Reserve moves that interest rate up or down, it's going to have an impact. But why is that impact? What happens to our dollars when we put them in the bank? What's the bank doing with it? Why? How come Uh, some people seem to have more favor, access to capital more so than black folks, even though we are shopping and doing our business in the same institutions. Um, is the component simply a racial division, or are those classes and groups of people um, extracting race and color, or are they going into those major financial institutions armed with more information, more know-how, being adroit in manipulating that financial system? Are we being wise? You know, don't be a fool like me and get loans and money and stuff like that and buy toys. The toys is the excess. You know, I finally got it together where, you know, when I get some opportunities again to get some major funds and capitals, I know now to get assets. I know now to purchase things that are going to uh, create income, you know, real estate, investing, things like that. You know, what too many of us black folks are conditioned, raised in that worker class. Oh, very sad. But if we get to some information and start to talk routinely around our dinner tables, collect around our dinner tables, put down our phones and turn off the television, we got a shot at creating some change. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Oh, excuse me. Don't worry, I'm totally into it. I just woke up. It's the problem. But I'm totally present. And this is very important work. Just a personal mission of mine. Dr. Claude Anderson, he talks about these issues much better than I can. He's written a bunch of works. I've read 3 of his books. Um, you can find him on. He's all over YouTube, and he's still touring the country speaking on these issues. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Since it's 101 questions, you can think that upwards of 1/3 of the year is going to be out of that book. Easy, no-brainer. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice for Black folks. It is a very in-depth study about the differences and the vulnerabilities of Black folks in America. And Powernomics, National Plan, excuse me, again, to empower Black America. And we are referencing that work today. We're taking a shift, economic shift today. Also, we take a fictional account of slave life in America, mid-1800s. Harriet Beecher Stowe's work. Uncle Tom's Cabin. We check in on Old Tom every once in a while. We just got done a big chapter, 2-parter about Eliza's escape over the cresting, ice flowing Ohio River. Very dramatic escape. She's jumping from ice chunk to ice chunk, holding little Harry in her arms. Very, this holds you captive reading that stuff. Very, very great writer she is. Um, we go to that work, although it's a fictional account of slave life. I believe she's being very descriptive of the plight of slaves, slave masters in slavery, America. This is just right before the Civil War. Okay. Oh, also behind me, hashtag us too. This is the Black females movement. Of course, everybody's welcome. Chime in there. Black enough. BLAGGENUF. Another place to hang out if you are business minded. You can go to the blackbusinessschool.com. Find Mr. Dr. Boyce Watkins there. He's a good guy, a lot of great products and stuff. As soon as I get myself situated, I might participate more with some of his products there. Get you interested in business, some lectures. So he's got a lot of good stuff there. All right, we're talking about economics today, coming out of Powernomics. And this is out of chapter 5. It's various economic action steps. We're not going to do an action steps series. Just we don't want to confine ourselves. It seems like when I come to politics, that's very I have much of a burden for that. So we do seem to get serial with the politics, especially in light of our present administration and whatnot. You think as far as politics, we've not, it's going on 4 years, we've really done little as far as the nation, nothing glaring. The people are still holding their positions and jobs and whatnot, but we got a long way to go, long way to go. Too many of the president's men, all the president's men, I won't say all of them, but too many of them, they're getting jail time. People associated with this guy. It's like, wait a minute. President's got time to. One commentator pointed out this morning how the president of the United States has time to sift through Twitter feeds and to respond. And it's all personal responses. I didn't know presidents had that much free time, to be honest with you. This one does. But we're going to take a look at economic action steps. And now this is very close. This is actually, I believe, the primary motivation behind Dr. Anderson's work. He talks about how black folks are getting along in the wealthiest nation on earth. And the wealth, it's a derived wealth because big institutions are manipulating numbers and things like that. It's not like we have tons of gold. Our wealth doesn't rest on that. Our wealth rests on creative financing. Very creative. You think God spoke the universe into existence out of nothing. You should see what these people are doing with finances, but that's a very complicated thing that I'm not even beginning. I don't have that ability to articulate, but there's a lot of good books on that. You can read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island that I've purchased, and there's books on the Federal Reserve and things like that that'll explain that. But anyway, with that, all that big creative financing going on, how blacks get so little of that. And again, it's kind of a two-edged sword of blacks need to behave a certain way to get things done. We'll talk about this just in a moment, but we need our consumer and business base has to be loyal with one another to make it work. Dr. Anderson would call it ethno-aggregation, where there's a loyalty, there's a nationalism to what we do, what we have. Other groups do it very exclusively. Hispanics, Asians, they work with their groups. Hispanics, they may work some with blacks. Asians are even hard. It's a harder group to breach in their exclusivity. So blacks need to be able to do the same. My room, I can look under almost everything except the food, I guess, and find it's made in China. I work for a logistics company. Big, all night long, huge, heavy boxes. We're just moving Chinese products into this country. If you can picture those big cargo ships with those big containers. They're just filled with Chinese goods. I don't see any trade war coming on. It's like the war on drugs. Okay, let's get to it. So part of this conversation is very briefly. It's going to be borderline vertical integration, but not a total vertical integration. Vertical integration would be um, from the raw materials of a product or service all the way to its sale, to that polished um, uh, item. We'll even take something complicated with a lot of parts, like a car. We would, um, a vertical integrated, a fully vertically integrated black car manufacturing and sales would be the black folks extracting the rubber, steel, making the plastic, then refining them, making electronic parts, making the hardened parts for the chassis, hubs, brakes, and things like that. We make our own engines and pistons and rings, turn all the parts and belts, and our engineers would make the engine and be creative with creating the engine and whatnot, and then we'd have a plant that puts it all together, an assembly line like Ford, and then we'd have a whole sales force. We'd have our own trucking companies. You've seen the trucks that carry cars. They're carrying upwards of what, 8, 10 cars, and across country, and there'd be a distribution, and we'd have our own dealerships, our own salespeople. That's the vertical integration of cars, our own glass and all that stuff. Well, this will be a microcosm of a full vertical integration, because it's a journey. If blacks ever get there, if we can start moving in that direction, we could theoretically have our own exclusive car dealership business, manufacturing, extracting raw materials, sales force, and whatnot. But it would begin with some of the peripherals. If we could dominate, let's just say with tires, if we um, get our own rubber fields, and where raw rubber begins, and begin in that process of making the rubbers, start competing with Goodyear, Firestone, and those big rubber giants, making our own tires and things like that, and then selling that product to the car manufacturers, but it would be our brand, black tires or whatever. You know, that's going to be what we're talking about today. It says we're going to create an alternative economy through that, through the distribution and creation of rubber and the tires and things like that. We can make our own community, our own economic community, where the manufacture of this, and this is, we see this everywhere, where there's a big, wherever there's a big industrial complex, the community starts to live and develop and breathe, and then there's a shopping center, and there's hair care, and there's auto care, schools are there. There's infrastructure for police, fire, medical care, anything you can think of. Restaurants, fast food, things like that spring up because the major industrial complex is thriving and it's employing individuals from that community, and they take that money back and they circulate it around within themselves. That's going to be the idea of today's conversation. So these economies, they'd be outside the mainstream. Um, you have the mainstream here, and these little micro economies would be part of the result of industry. It'd be like any community near the Great Lakes. There'd be fishing, so then there'd be a lot of fish restaurants. There'd be fish processing, things like that, as the fishing industry brought in those catches. Um, with those, and also you create businesses to serve boat mechanics, to serve a whole boat mechanic industry, to serve the major fishing industry, maybe even a union um, to send labor on the boats, that kind of thing is what I'm talking about. I worked at a place years ago in Pennsylvania. We were nowhere near actually any car manufacturers, but we polished car door handles and did some work with the handles that the major processes couldn't do. You needed some hands-on things to go on. Um, and the purpose of this would be to build jobs, to stimulate black folks' economy big time, much like maybe like a Chinese uh, group or business would control like a hotel. They would control that hotel, provide that service, but there's the major businesses going on in the city. But one of the things that would make this work is we talked about this at the top of our time together, is some customer loyalty, business loyalty. Businesses would have to be exclusive, and that's the big thing with black folks. Since we're already economically compromised, too often we're compromising and giving our energy and business to other groups paying more. And I get it. Those money makes sense. It's one thing to be loyal, but you want to put food on the table. You want a good product and things like that. So I'm not denying that some of my thinking is wishful. I am just saying, that there's going to be some sacrifices that are going to need to be made to get this stuff understood, to get it moving along. Hey, we Dr. Anderson, even in this section of the book, it's Powernomics. Pages starts on page 129. He tells a story of a black company approaching an Asian company with a product, and the Asian company refuses. The black folks, okay, they give it some time, they restructure their proposal. They come in to offer this product or service at a 25% discount to the Asians. The Asians still refuse. And incredulous, the black company is what are you, what? Right? You know how black folks can be too. They gonna step to you. Hey, but the thing is, they're really jammed up that these Asians aren't going to work with them in this business. And the Asians just explain, it's like, look, you black folks don't get it. We work with our own kind. Now that's the place that black folks are going to need to get to. Um, right now, see the Asians, like, they know the Asians are going to still bring them their business, and they have that microcosm of nationalism that keeps them going. They can say to somebody offering a product or service for a 25% discount that we can refuse you because we know our people are going to come to us. We are going to serve our people. It's a no-brainer for us. They're trying to communicate a very important lesson to us. Very hard one for us to accept, but that's the way it is. That's the truth. And the Asians tell them that. And it's right here in Dr. Anderson's book. I believe it. Uh, I believe it. Um, for us to get some type of business element going, take serious. It's going to take that kind of dedication, that kind of sacrifice to get it done, hands down. Um, so it's going to be this. So we're going to need that loyal, our microcosm of nationalism, black nationalism, to make it work. Other groups already do it, and but they're not sure explicit and waving banners on it. It's just something we just have to do. We don't have to advertise that we're exclusively black. We just do it. It's our product or service. We don't have to, um, you know, deal with anyone we don't want to. Period. You know, if it's a public thing, yeah, there are laws that protect the entire public, but we can have a private um, conglomerate and you know our private clubs and whatnot. Other groups have it all the time. Um, so that's some of the things we're going to need. Um, and we pretty much covered the topic, and we're going to cover this before. I think we've covered it before. We're going to cover it more again, where we just rehash and we focus more and more, get more myopic on these things as I continue to study and become more articulate, um, and as my days are filled more with more sensitivity around these objects. These things uh, become clearer. I feel like I have a diamond. These things impact my life personally. I feel the tug. I feel the encroachment on my life. I feel the lack of control. I feel the encroachment on my time and my energy. But now through Dr. Anderson's work, it's been articulated, studied, and it's real. I'm not just talking in theories. I would talk to people about the system, and their eyes would glass over and they would nod as they're reaching for the phone to call the medical people to come pick me up. That's what it feels like. So I'm glad. I'm glad for all that. So that's today's um, short piece. You know, we want grand. The goal is to have a grand, vertically integrated business where we control things from beginning to end. Now, I will say the thing I'm learning about business though is, do we really want to do that? Um, the short business exposure that I've run into is there's more outsourcing, there's more leveraging of some of the details, and where the major business may not want want to micromanage all the little bits and pieces. I'll just real quick as we end up here is the logistics company I work for. They're just worried about what's going on in house. That's it. A separate trucking company brings the packages to a specific location. The logistics company handles all that sorting in-house, and a separate carrying company with the vans distributes the product to the neighborhoods. You know, the branding is all over the place, but it's not one big company. The brand is there, but it's three separate companies. The main company is the hub handling the packages, but there's a trucking company, and then there's different smaller carriers taking it. So that may be another model to consider. If other races participate, then they would have to be subordinate to the main structure. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Thank you. That's day 79 of 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you tomorrow.